So good afternoon, good evening to all of you, members of ESA, conference delegates, to this closing ceremony that it's starting after 4 days of intensive debate, connections, dialogues, meetings online in different multiple ways. Even like in a virtual, real virtual ways. So it's been so exciting to be with all of you throughout this journey. We still haven't finished because there are many important things still to happen in this afternoon, evening, depending on when you are in Europe. So we, in this conference, this closing ceremony, it includes something that for the first time we are having in ESA, which is an awards ceremony. This has been discussed many times, and in these last 2 years, we said like that we need to have awards. There are so wonderful people contributing to ESA, contributing to our journals, that it is so nice to award these wonderful contributions. So we decided to have awards, and this is the moment that we want to acknowledge wonderful academic contributions that have been done in our 2 journals of ESA, and also a contribution of a young scholar, because we know that the young scholars are the future of this association. No, it's not that all of us, all of us are in the association, but also the young scholars. We want to encourage them to contribute and to be visible as much as possible. So this is the first time that we give an awards, and so there has been a process that both in the postgraduate committee and the publications committee have worked in order to establish a procedure of how to give these awards. For the journals, so there has been a committee which has revised the articles being published in the 2 former years. So this we are establishing that every 2 years we'll be able to celebrate wonderful pieces published in our journals. So this is something we start, and every 2 years we'll be able to see in what has been published in the journals, and to be able to acknowledge that. And in the case of the young scholar, it is very much linked to a dissertation, a contribution that is coming from a recent PhD graduate. So with this, I am so happy to give the floor to the chair of the postgraduate committee, Melissa Antic-Gaber, that she will introduce to you the ESA Awards. Melissa.
Thank you very much, Marta. So this year, ESA Best Article Awards for the paper published in European Journal of Culture and Political Sociology goes to Mona Manuevo, and for her paper titled Anxious Politicians, Productivity Imperatives in the Finnish Parliament. And now I would clap my hands and shake the hands of Mona, but she's not here. But we are calling her, and if she likes, she can address this audience for a minute or so.
Yes, I am here. I hope you can hear me now or see me. So first of all, I really want to thank the selection committee for choosing me to receive this award. This was such a wonderful surprise. And it really means a lot to me, especially because I am an early career researcher with a multidisciplinary background in the humanities and social sciences. So the award gives me a lot of confidence to cross boundaries between different fields of study also in the future. But most of all, I want to thank the European Journal of Cultural and Political Sociology for giving me the possibility to publish this paper. And I also want to thank the anonymous reviewers for their encouraging words and detailed constructive review of my paper. And after I had revised the paper, it connected much better 3 strands of theory: cultural sociology, political science, and cultural studies. So thank you, reviewers, whoever you are. Thank you.
For the best paper published in European societies, the winner is Dite Anderson for her paper titled Stuck: Welfare State, Dependency as Lived Experience. I'm not sure whether we have Dite online. Yes.
I'm here.
Nice.
Can you hear me?
Dite, congratulations.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Wherever you are.
Thank you.
A moment.
Thank you. I'm very happy and honored and humbled and feel very privileged to be part of this sociological community. The paper, as you say, aims to deepen our understanding of welfare state dependency as lived experience. And in that way, I think it really speaks to the theme of this conference, Sociological Knowledges for Alternative Futures. Committing sociology is, of course, a never-ending team effort. And I owe thanks to all of the participants, first of all, in my research, and many sociological co-thinkers, the reviewers and editor, and many colleagues. I just want to mention one in particular in this context. A special thank you to Professor Margareta Järvinen from Department of Sociology at University of Copenhagen, who has been an inspiration and a mentor for me for many years. I hope I will be able to pass it on and give a contribution back to the sociological community. Thank you.
Thank you. A postgraduate committee for the Young Scholar Award for 2021 decided to give to Felipe González Santos for his paper Rocking the Boat of Eviction, Personal Availability and Empowerment in Social Movement Organizations. Is Felipe with us? Congratulations, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much. Like, it's the same as the other two. I'm very thrilled to have received this recognition for my work, even more because I know many young sociologists in Europe, and I know so many who would deserve this award. So this is really humbling, and I'm really thankful for to the committee for giving me this recognition. And yes, and I think that this is a great initiative to support young researchers. I see that all three we are young researchers on different awards, but we're all very young. So I think that it also shows that the European sociology is very promising, and we're growing more and more. And yes, I'm looking forward to continuing working on these lines and advancing European sociology. Thank you so much.
Okay. Postgraduate committee also give the special mentions for the paper written by Sara Merlini, Misrecognition, Gender Beyond Binary. This is only special mentions, but we decided that it deserves this at the closing ceremony. But I realized that with us is also the chair of publication committee, Professor Ludger Priest, and I would like to give him floor now and apologize. We were not at the beginning sure if he is with us, but now he is, and the floor is yours, Ludger.
Well, thank you very much. I just had some technical problems to enter, and I think it's much better that you directly at place in Barcelona were able to hand out these awards. If you want, I could share at least a digital version of these awards so that the winners can see what they will. I'm disabled. Please, if you make me co-host, I could share the digital, at least the digital version of the whole awards. Or perhaps somebody of the ESA office could. I'm disabled. I'm sorry to do so, but I'm fully convinced that you will receive at least the digital version of the award quite immediately. And I wish you all the best for your future. And I'm fully convinced that we will see in the next ESA conference when you will have an important paper to present as well. Thank you very much, and good luck for the future.
I think, Ludger, that you are co-host now, if you wanted to share something.
Okay, it's just to show the awards in the digital, at least in the digital way. I hope you can see it now. Okay, so here, this is Felipe González Santos, Rocking the Boat of Eviction, Personal Availability and Empowerment in Social Movement Organization. A very important topic, I think. So again, congratulations. The second award was on the best article award. We struggled a little bit of naming it best article award or best paper award, therefore sometimes the confusion. So this is Ditte Andersen, congratulations, Stuck Welfare State Dependency as Lived Experience. I was very much enjoying reading your paper as well. And the best article award for European Journal of Cultural and Political Sociology is for Mona Manouvour, already mentioned, Anxious Politicians' Productivity Imperatives in the Finnish Parliament. It's mainly in ESA we have comparative articles and papers, you know, and you are aware in European societies. But this is a very interesting case as all the other awards in the sense of doing a deep quanti-quali research on topics that are very crucial in terms of power relations and decision-making processes, but perhaps not so visible. And in many times we just only focus on the visible things, and we as sociologists, I think, are able to do to shed light on the not so visible mechanisms of decision-making and doing policy as an everyday life activity. So very nice. And then the honorary mentions are not digitalized, but I'm fully convinced that they will also get their award, and I will be able to put it in their, I don't know, dormitory or in the university office or whatever. So thank you very much and good luck for the future.
Thank you so much, Ludger. And maybe you see me doing like that because we have here a screen there. And so these digital times, no, that we are getting confused like where we are. So we are here. Thank you so much. And congratulations from all of us to these awardees. So we are here, which means that we are start to begin the third plenary session of this conference on sociological knowledges for alternative futures. So for that, let me invite Professor Teresa Sordet, who will be who's chair of the conference and who will be sharing this this session. Please, Teresa.
Well, welcome to the plenary session on sociological knowledge for sustainable futures. that we will count with the participation of Elizabeth Shove and Luigi Pellizzoni, that will take us to the end of this wonderful conference. This session is dedicated to one of the most important challenges humanity is facing, climate change, and in which ways sociologists can support this collective and necessary endeavor. Different lenses and course of actions will be presented by the hand of our two speakers tonight. Without more delay, I will move to introduce the audience, Elizabeth Shove, who will present Connecting Practices, Large Topics in Society and Social Theory. Elizabeth Shove is Professor of Sociology at Lancaster University. She is best known for her work on social theories of practices, including the dynamics of social practice with Matt Watson and Micah Panzer, and for bringing a distinctive approach to bear on questions of consumption and demand. Actually, Elizabeth led the Demand Center from 2013 to 2018. The core proposition that energy is used not for its own sake, but in the course of accomplishing social practices at home, at work, and in moving around underpin the center research and help generate new and sometimes challenging ways of thinking about these topics. Books arising from that work include The Nexus of Practices, Infrastructures in Practice, Energy, Fables, and Conceptualizing Demand. Elizabeth is part of the group working on practice theory at Lancaster, thinking about how social practices connect and change together, and about the relevance of these ideas for debates about health and well-being, economic sociology, and social inequality. Elizabeth has a visiting position at the University of Helsinki at the Center for Consumer Society Research. So without more delay, I will give the floor to Elizabeth.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And I'm going to share the screen and show you some slides. So that's how we'll go. So I'm going to share the screen now. So just nod if that looks okay. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much for this invitation. And it's also very challenging to kind of finish a conference. And so my strategy was to go back to the beginning, to think about the theme of the conference and to work through the implications of that theme. Now, conference themes are always a bit strange. I don't know exactly who writes them or who reads them or if they have any real purpose at all. But nonetheless, it provided a really good starting point for me. So I'm going to look back at the conference theme and its assumptions and actually do that a bit critically. I'm going to look forward, recognizing that there are different kinds of sociology and different forms of sociological knowledge. I'm going to say a bit about practice theory, really to say that I think that's one form of sociology which changes the agenda. And I'm going to work through those ideas to hopefully, I know there's no time for debate, but nonetheless provoke debate about what sociology is, what contribution it can really make to this field, and what it means to have a better understanding, what is relevant knowledge to improve society. And I hope to do all of that with a bit of a focus on sustainability. So that's the overall plan. Now then, I don't expect you to read all of this, but this is the text of the conference theme. What I've done here is highlight in different colors a few key words and listed on the right-hand side what I think are some of the issues arising from that. So apparently the conference is dealing with several challenges that come from elsewhere: climate change, sustainable development, violence, conflict. We're dealing with inequalities that are shaped by those challenges. So as I've said in purple, that's a way of framing the challenges as kind of outside the social world. They have a bearing on it. If you read a little bit further down, and this is definitely a partial reading, so, you know, there are arguments to be had about this, but there's reference to responses, younger generations, social movements, different contributions and agency, different ways of changing society, perhaps in response to those challenges. Going a bit further, the next few terms about actions, choices, rethinking, deciding, suppose that individuals' actions, maybe these social movements or these young people, can do differently. That is the basic proposition here. To go into the pink and the purple, really, that's important because there are inequalities to be fought, there are natural environments to be protected, goals to be achieved in pink. And finally, the value in this analysis, in this interpretation, the value of sociological knowledge is to help address all of the above, to help develop institutions, to build solid scientific knowledge that kind of contributes to this agenda. I'm going to say a little bit more now about the social theory, if you like, that underlies these assumptions. It's in a way repeating what I've just said. Climate change is something that has a bearing on social arrangements. So are threats to health, so are different kinds of inequalities and so on. So they are external problems. Social movements are important because they kind of, by implication, can change that situation. And then this issue of agency and structure in the text is very straightforward. It just supposes agency. But actually, in the history of sociological theory, that's a huge debate. I mean, what if actions are outcomes of social practices? What if, as Giddens says, what if practices are the central topics, not the actions of individuals? Then to follow through a little bit in the pink, the normative positions are rather unclear, actually. It sounds great, but who are we fighting? What are we fighting for? Where's the sociology of position there? And finally, again, the knowledge is to improve society. Well, nothing wrong with that. But whose questions about society? How are these questions framed? And which agendas, in a way, are implicitly inscribed in the conference theme? Well, this is beginning to get to open up some lines of inquiry. I know it's just a conference theme. I know it's the end of the conference. I know it's the worst possible time to start, questioning the very why we're here and the very purpose of this sort of agenda. But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move away from understanding responses to large societal concerns, or better understanding what individuals can do, or informing decisions and actions, and those kinds of things. Instead, I'm going to take a position that supposes that sociology is good and useful because it provides a different way of framing these issues. I'm going to say, if we take social practices as the basic kind of domain of study for the social sciences, we don't have the kind of agenda that is set out in the conference theme. So you can attack me later on, but I'm in charge at the moment. Okay, I need to go further, and to do that, I need to say a little bit more about what I mean by social practices and why I think that's a different kind of stance. So for me, and also for Giddens in 1984, I agree, the basic domain of study is social practices, are social practices. These exist across space and time, so it's not the individual actor, it's not the structure, it's the practices that energize both, if you like. So I like this picture. It's a bit of a weird picture. It's two chaps dancing. In a way, they're doing the dancing. The dance is the practice they are enacting. But of course, they're not doing it for the first time. The pattern on the ground is the kind of choreography that they're following. They're joining in a form of dancing that existed before their actual action and that will continue to exist across time and space. They're practitioners. They're in a way carrying this practice of dancing. Practices in that sense do exist across space and time, and that's important. Hold on a second. sorry about that. They exist across space and time, and they combine not just dancing, but other kinds of practices as well to form large social phenomena. So if this is what we're interested in the circulation of practices across space and time. We're interested in connections between practices, and we've in a way got a different set of questions, I think, to follow. Okay, so if we go along with that, what does this mean for the really big topics in society today? For climate change, for energy demand, for environmental pollution, maybe for bigger trends like obesity and health and wealth and so on. I think social practice theory shifts the way we frame those topics and shifts the nature of the sociological contribution. So I'm going to kind of unpack that a little bit with reference to a few examples. As was said in the introduction, which is very nice, the Demand Centre took seriously the proposition that people don't just use energy, they use it in accomplishing social practices at home, at work, in moving around. In which case, if we want to understand energy demand, the first thing to do is to understand how energy intensive practices become embedded in society. How do they carry energy through society, and how are they reproduced? These are huge sociological topics, ones that can be approached from different angles. It's about material relations, standardization, collective conventions. It's not about individual choice or decision making. But so to illustrate that, one really good case is the rise of air conditioning, massively energy intensive. And here's a slide that sort of captures something of the scale of the energy demand that follows the rise of cooling. Cooling to 18, 20, 21, 22 degrees C. If that happened all over the world, especially in large and hot cities, the energy demand that would follow is absolutely massive. Here's CVAC saying the potential cooling demand in metropolitan Mumbai would be about, if it was all to be cooled to the current standards, would be about 24% of the demand at the moment for the entire US. So here's a trend that's massively important. What can sociology say about this? What kinds of issues does it raise? And here are just some, if we're interested in changing practices. If we're interested in changing practices that lead to air conditioning, like a lot of it in this picture from Singapore, then we would need to understand the circulation of these technologies, their embedding in different societies, how they're absorbed, the different forms of like circulation and abstraction, configurations, not just of heating and cooling technologies, but what people wear, the rhythms of the day, different kinds of institutions, different sorts of rules and expectations. We'd be interested in the full gamut of that and in how that makes an understanding of what's normal and how that's reproduced. And I would say sociology has loads of good ideas about those processes, which again are not about social movements, they're not about individual actors, they're not about kind of flipping responses. Here's just some of them. I mean, the kinds of ideas that we might draw on include sociology of like institutions or material culture. They might be issues about, as I've already mentioned, timing and demand. And I think sociology has the chance to put these pieces together in a new and really challenging and interesting way, so that we move beyond individual sites and cases and can say something useful about, I've got a picture here of a ratchet kind of like one-way movement where some kind of social trend is then held in place by like peg number 2, if you like, which are other social trends that hold that social trend in place. So understanding cooling and energy demand is about understanding changing conventions of comfort, about changing clothing, and when those change, when they shift around air conditioning, then the whole mass becomes locked in place, if you like. So there's a kind of locked in place in a way that calls for more energy. So I think this is just a metaphor in a way, but there is some kind of ratcheting and process of amplification and the kind of interweaving of processes which we can make a really useful contribution to. For my next example, I'm going to leave energy and think about the sorts of contributions that might apply in relation to pollution. This is a fantastic picture of the Pacific garbage patch, and it shows really massive amount of plastic gathered here. So from this point of view, my question is, what are the practices that underlie this garbage patch? How did this come to be? And I think to catch some of that, sociologists are not dealing with individual attitudes or waste or these kinds of issues. They have to get stuck into the history of plastic, and in particular, the history of plastic as a disposable product. Without that, you can't understand this kind of picture. And there's no problem in framing an agenda that addresses these issues in these terms. There's all sorts of great work actually already about like the consumption of water, making water as a commodity, making mobility, how the two kind of come together. Drinking on the move constitutes the water bottle as a commodity. And there's also great work. Plastic is not one material. It's a very interesting field. Plastics are designed. Plastics change in different ways as they degrade. This is not an accident. It's part of the social material kind of natural interface. And I would say understanding pollution at scale is about understanding this complex of relations. So again, it's not about actions, choices, rethinking decisions. It is about an interlocking of material, social relations and practices on a global scale. So the garbage patch is a trace of all of that. It's the residue, the material residue of dozens and dozens and dozens of different practices as they result in bodies, and they leave behind them bodies of plastic particles. So this is not terribly well-trod territory, but we need better to understand how practices accumulate and how materials and residues accumulate at scale. I think that's crucial for a climate change agenda. And I think it's also crucial for other really big agendas in society too, including an agenda about obesity. So I don't know if anybody read this book. I think it's absolutely great. It's a history of obesity. I think there's lots of parallels with the sorts of accumulations that I've just described of energy demand and of pollution, and also trends in obesity. And I think that's the case because all of them are, in a way, outcomes of practices. The shape of our body is a consequence of the shape of what we do. That's clear. So these kinds of trends, body masses increasing 30%, tripling since 1975, we have to ask ourselves, what is going on here in the land of social practices? What can sociology tell us? And of course, it can tell us lots about body image, symbolic significance, gender, the kind of victimization of people who are overweight and these kinds of things. But I would say the really big issues are about what are the practices that connect to changes in body shape at scale. And for that, we need to recognize that sociology can sometimes be on the back foot. If we're thinking about obesity or environment as well, actually, there are plenty of people who say, well, it's about what individuals choose. It's about their choice of food, their choice of exercise, whatever. And what sociology could help with is helping understand these choices. So please, sociologists, help us provide the knowledge we need to address these issues by better informing people's choice. But that's not what I'm getting at. What I'm saying is obesity, like environmental pollution, like energy demand, is a consequence of social practices, not individual choices. And if we take that route, then the kinds of things that sociology can say about obesity are about the temporal organization of society, about convenience, about space, employment, the structure of the day, all of which connect to food and trends in food. This is not about individual choice. So if sociologists do what I'm suggesting, if they take social theory seriously, they're likely to be out of step with dominant agendas about what sociology is good for. So to go back to the call, my question is, can this kind of sociological knowledge which kind of sociological knowledge can improve society, and what does that mean? So I think there's some real tensions ahead. Do we fall into dominant agendas and just deliver useful knowledge, or do we challenge dominant agendas and say, well, hang on, there are other ways of framing these problems? I'm moving on fast here. There's obviously some really important issues in kind of mainstream sociology about inequality and wealth, and there are important themes in the call as well about injustice and inequality. And as we know, just as obesity is not equally distributed amongst populations, neither is wealth. This picture shows extreme differences in the ownership of wealth. And again, we know more generally that inequalities of wealth are linked to carbon emissions. So the picture's beginning to hang together here. And the question again for me is, what are the practices that underpin this vastly unequal picture? How are we to think about that? And what does social practice theory deliver for an understanding of inequality? So I've already mentioned some things about accumulation of energy demands of plastic particles and also wealth, I would say. So there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with a conference that wants to engage with issues of injustice and inequality, that wants to move towards a more egalitarian and sustainable society. But the question is, what is the diagnosis? How is it that we come to be where we are? And what is the kind of problem that's being addressed here? And I'm saying practice theory provides a different way of framing those problems. It frames it in a way that we have to think about the circulation of practices, social and spatial differences, patterns of accumulation, historical trends in practices that result in body mass or plastic pollution, or different kind of forms of energy demand. So the fact that ours is an unequal society is not just about who wins and loses. It's about the long-term historical consequences of the practices of which society is made. If you take that seriously, I think you've got another agenda to focus on. Sociologically, there's something about how wealth and climate change interweave. There's something about how plastic particles and other particles circulate. There's something about different styles and forms of accumulation. And these are definitely not the main headings in a sociology textbook. These are not the kind of dominant themes yet, but I think they could be. And I think this is where the agenda lies. So I would say the big sociological challenge is that of conceptualizing the total weave of society and the textures of advantage, that not just who wins and loses, but how is the entire constitution of society organized such that there are inequalities, differences of accumulation for the environment as well as for health and in other kinds of ways, and how do these combine and interlock? So this is quite a rapid and grand tour of some really big questions, probably okay for the end of a conference. So I've just got 2 slides to finish with. One is to go back to the call. It ends really in a really inspiring way. Now is the time to discuss how sociology offers better understandings and relevant knowledges to improve society. And as I said, I want to provoke discussion about that. The rest of that call was about understanding people's responses, understanding what individuals can do, getting evidence about decisions and actions, and understanding collective trends. And the title was Sociological Knowledges for Alternative or Sustainable Futures. So it was framed in a way, so what kind of sociology is needed to make or connect to a kind of imagined or anticipated future, what the individuals can do, these kinds of questions. So I'm hoping that I sort of shifted you maybe towards the next conference, who knows, to say, yes, now is the time to discuss how sociology offers better understandings and relevant knowledges, but they're not what you thought they were. They're not what was listed before. This kind of better knowledge is about understanding how social practices combine to form large social phenomena. It's about understanding accumulation, the reproduction of advantage, extension and spread of practices, understanding the recursive social material relations of nature and society. This depends on taking sociology seriously. It depends on working with social theory, recognizing that social practices, like Giddens said, constitute the basic domain of study for the social sciences. And it means really taking issue, challenging dominant ideas about what sociology is and what people do, and thinking differently. And so with just a small twist on the title, I'd say future sociologies are about generating alternative knowledges. So I'm going to stop sharing there. And that's basically what I had to say. And sorry for the interruption.
Elizabeth, thank you for this brilliant speech. And now it's time to move to our next speaker, who is Luigi Pellizzoni, who is Professor of Sociology of the Environment at the University of Pisa. Professor Pellizzoni has taught at the University of Trieste, Venice, and at the International School for Advanced Studies. Recent visiting includes the Center for the Study of Environmental Change in Lancaster, in the UK, and appointments comprise a two-term service in the ESA Executive Committee from 2011 to 2015. He has an extensive record of research at international level and author about 140 publications. His theoretical and empirical interests are located at the intersection of environmental challenges and empirical and technoscience advancement and the transformation of governance. In the last year, he has been developing a research program on the reciprocal affections of novel takes on materiality and governmental rationality of the late capitalism, results on which are accounted for in articles, book chapters, and the book Ontological Politics in a Disposable World, The New Mastery of Nature. He is presently working on new social mobilizations, post-work anticipatory governance, and alternative ways of relating with the world. He is coordinator of the research group and community of discussion, politics, ontologies, ecologies. Luigi Pellizzoni will speak about forms of sustainability of forms, sociology, critique, and forms of life. So the floor is yours. Luigi.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And sorry for the complex title, but I try to explain the reason for that. Thanks for the invitation, of course. It's a big honor, a big challenge also to give the very last speech in this very big and dense conference. So I'll try to do my best. And the first question was how to deal with this topic, whether to present, let's say, settled, relatively settled things or something going on, some work in progress. I decided to go this way also because for the conclusion of a conference, maybe it's better to, let's say, to open up or try to open up some research direction. I try to share my screen. Okay. So this is more or less the outline. Don't be too worried that we go rather quickly. So the first point is what kind of times we are facing and what kind of sociological knowledge we can use for addressing them. Then I will focus on the evolution, the narrative of sustainability, focusing especially on the emergent governmental rationale of late capitalism, with also COVID-19 as a clue. And then I will address the way in which knowledge, sociological knowledge may matter, addressing the problem of critique. And then I will focus on this concept, a little bit tricky. I will try to say something about that, of forms of life, and finally some clues to research directions. So I won't devote too much time and saying things about the state of affairs. It's quite complex, quite difficult. And the important thing to me is that it combines an ecological crisis with a very deep social and political crisis. This combination is not, let's say, accidental. but it repeats a situation which emerged decades ago, but of course with new feature, new characteristics. So the question is, what can sociology say? What kind of sociological knowledge we can use for addressing these times, these problems? Bearing in mind that we have many theories, many approaches, more holistic, more individualistic, more theoretical, and more oriented towards action, participatory action. And bearing in mind also that there has been a huge intellectual movement against the very notion of society, the person that you see at the bottom of the screen. And so this makes possibly the task of sociology tougher. I think that a possibility is to address what can be named the ruling problematization of this moment. By problematization, I use this term that is drawn from Michel Foucault, by which it means how certain types of questions arise and rule in a given historical period, as certain types of answers become conceivable and appear reasonable. So in a kind of loop that fills the space of what looks important and reasonable. And so even apparently quite different, even opposed answer to the question share an underlying, worldview or structure of meaning. So the attempt that sociological knowledge could try to do is to exit from this loop, at least try to do. First of all, let me just review the very well-known narrative of the sustainability that emerged over time. Of course, the starting point is sociological crisis around 1970, which again we can call perfect storm in the sense that they combine the explosion of the ecological problem as a global problem, and also a very deep social crisis of the end of the glorious 30s with the crisis of capitalism, Fordism, and also the welfare state, and then the democratic state. So altogether, it was a perfect storm. The first reply we know very well was the limits to growth. So the idea that we should change deeply and stop the model of growth and change from the bottom our societal model, especially economic model. And there were attempts to do or to try to do that, especially via social mobilization, ecological movements. But we also know that the actual response, the winning reply, so to say, was the end of Fordism and the beginning of post-Fordism, and so a new accumulation cycle. What is important in that is that the case for the limits of growth was, in a sense, reversed into a case for a growth of limits. So the basic idea was that we are able to stand the planetary limits by virtually expanding them in the sense that by means of relentless technological innovation and relentless reorganization of economic activity, we can become more and more efficient in our use of resources. So the call for limits turn upside down in a sense. So limits were in a sense remain acknowledged, but we're losing more and more any practical relevance. What is important to keep in mind, in my view, is that the story does not just continue in this way since the 80s onwards, but at some point around the late 90s, early 2000s, the situation changes and some new narrative emerged, which in my view can be regarded as a new phase of capitalism under neoliberal rule, which is based on a kind of not just acceptance, but celebration and use and exploitation of instability, uncertainty, insecurity, and so on and so forth. And in this perspective, the case for the growth of limits becomes the dominant narrative changes once more, and the dominant narrative becomes the case for the internalization of limits. And of course, the very notion of Anthropocene is telling in this sense, because the Anthropocene, as we know, is the idea that there is no basic difference any longer between society and planet, as a society, human society has taken an impact on geological processes comparable to planetary forces. So this is emblematic of the idea of the internalization limit, but there are many examples that explain what is the new, the emergent ontology, the emergent rationale of this new, let's say, governmental attitude, which in my view bears a lot on the idea of the blurring of distinction, of ontological distinction. I give here some examples. For example, if you take a biotech, the very idea of distinction between nature and technology is challenged, because if you think the narrative of biotech companies that they say, well, we are doing nothing special, just what nature is doing since the beginning. And of course, humans have been doing since the beginning of agriculture. And also the patents cover at the same time the material, the seed, for example, and the information that is included in the seed. And the coverage, the legal coverage is covers all those things, shifting from one ontological dimension to another very, very swiftly. So the very basic distinction between nature and technology, between matter and language, is brought into question. Same things with big data. The distinction, fundamental distinction between discovery and invention gets blurred. The distinction between real and virtual gets blurred, because big data, in a sense, reveal via analysis and algorithm, reveal something that is this is in a sense said as being present in the data, but at the same time created by the very algorithm that is mining and analyzing it. Geoengineering, just as well. The idea of control becomes very tricky, because the control, if you think of solar radiation management, for example, it becomes a kind of unleashing the forces of atmospheric turbulence in such a way that you can handle it step by step and on the spot. So it's very strange, though the technology is quite simple in a sense. So mirrors or spraying water and other gases or something like that, the logic behind it is very tricky, because the very idea of control becomes indistinguishable in a sense from the idea of not controlling anything, but letting loose the forces. The same thing with the ecosystem services. Human labor and non-human work becomes blurred. Even also the distinction between commodity and non-commodity. If you think, for example, that for payments for ecosystem, you are just the technician, the expert are just revealing or identifying a productive force, a productive value that is already present in nature without the need to transform it by way of human labor. So this is very, very interesting and very new in a sense. The COVID-19 also gives a clue on that. So the idea of preparedness, for example, becomes completely blurred, because the idea of intensifying experimentalism, because the pandemics are expected to come up time and again, means that the idea of readiness and unreadiness becomes totally blurred. The idea of the power of geological, biological forces, so viruses and bacteria, gets blurred by way of research on gain of function, so intervening into the characteristics, the genetic characteristics of viruses in such a way to stimulate their lethality or capacity to infect people. And again, the blurring of the nature, technology, and control unleashing distinction. And also the very idea of crisis as based on crisis was traditionally understood as point where you have to decide to take one way or another. But if you think the way the COVID-19 and other already announced pandemics are presented, there is no decision at all. This is just a modulation. It's just continuing. So the very goal of decision become not to avert or to stop the problem, but just to postpone the catastrophe and to modulate the crisis all the time. So this is also very, very interesting to me as a kind of new governmental rationality. So the question is, what kind of knowledge, what kind of sociological knowledge can be applied in this very particular situation? Again, particularly in that it presents some features that are similar to the crisis of the early 70s, but in another sense is completely different in the ontological understanding, is also in the way of ruling and governing. And I can see two different orientations. One is a plea for going back to Descartes. So to the old naturalism, the old dualism between nature and society, humanity and non-humans, and so on and so forth, as if the plea for a blurring and the, post-human case and so on and so forth was kind of a threat to the possibility of governing societies and environment. And the other orientation is the opposite. So just celebrating the blurring of everything as if it was provided by itself with emancipatory capacities. Because of course, against the dualism of naturalism, it does, but against the new governmental rationality that I was trying to showcase a moment ago, this is a big question mark, because by adopting the very same orientation toward reality, it becomes very difficult to get out of the problematization and criticize it. The problem of critique is also very, very big, because in a sense, the extension of the agree, don't agree style, in internet approval and disapproval of things and position makes a case for exhaustion of critique, but also there have been much more, compelling critiques of critique. For example, the new materials challenge. So critique is just a discourse, it's just rubbish. It does not lead to anything. It's important to embody a critique, to create different living conditions and so on and so forth. And also the post-colonial challenge. The Western notion of critique is pretending to give a view from nowhere, to speak in the name of everything, on any place, on any living condition. So I will say that in the last decade, there's been a strong attack on critique, which of course, for a discipline like sociology, that in a sense was born out of the possibility of criticizing what exists, the ruling setup of society, represent a problem. Yet, it is possible to think of critique in a different way, in an immanent way. For example, Adorno says that theory and practice are enmeshed from the outset and reciprocal and necessary. And so there can be a way of addressing reality by way of identity thinking, which means taking things to our own understanding, our own ideas, or trying to getting towards things, toward reality, becoming friendlier and attentive to our inability to grasp in full what lies before us, and to respect the diversity and impossibility to give full justice to reality. Likewise, Foucault says, okay, there is a kind of immanent critique where it's not a view from nowhere, but a positional view, which means raising the question of how not to be governed like that, by that, in the name of those principles, with such objectives in mind, with this procedure, not by them, not for that. So it's possible to develop an immanent critique that moves from the very situation in which we live. And I believe that this type of critique is not dead, it's very alive, and it is worth pursuing. In which way? Well, of course, the notion of sustainability was, in a sense, flawed from the beginning because it was part of, when it was formulated, of the case for the growth of limits. So sustainability became equivalent to the idea of a combination, nice combination of growth and protection of the environment. But the question is there any other account against the idea of the growth of limits, or even worse, the internationalization of limits? And my question, and I turn to the proposing part of my speech, can the notion of formal life help break this ruling problematization? Of course, the notion of formal life is very tricky. It's around since early 19th century. It has taken a lot of meaning. I just show here some of them: cultural review, historical formation, institutionalized social order, social technical system, of course, Wittgenstein language game. Yegi recently has developed the concept, historical evolving set of practices. Also, Eric Collins has proposed an interpretation. So there are many interpretations. My proposal, or my preference at least, goes towards another understanding of formal life, which can be borrowed from Benjamin and to some extent Agamben, which means formal life is a reciprocally affecting and affecting a relation between existence and way or posture to living. So, for example, Benjamin say there is a difference between the mere life and just existing, in the sense that you cannot ever reduce life to the mere biological, physical existence. Any existence is worth because it takes a form of its own. Similarly, Agamben says that there can be a life linked so closely to its form that cannot be separated from it. And both believe that this may work against violence, against exploitation and domination, also against market differentiation, the way to address needs and demands. In that sense, I think it's important to make a distinction between lifestyle and formal life. And I put it in a very rough way, if you want. So there is a difference between being what you do, which is the proposal that you get more and more, even in a good intention, I mean, but be what you do. So by way of what you do, you become what you want to be, rather than do what you are. So you just correspond to your form. And of course, I cannot address it, but Agamben addresses the case of monastic rules as a good example. But what does it mean, do what you are? There is an important point to me in this sense. The potential or the power of any individual and any being, human and also non-human, but especially human, is that I can do because I can also not do. This is what also Agamben says. So my power lies in the possibility to refuse to do or to become or to make. Yet there is an additional point. I am truly myself when at the very moment in which I find a point, I find a situation where I cannot do otherwise without, of course, betraying myself. This is the difference between choice rather than acknowledgement, which means follow your own inclination. But the very point is that it's just not your own, it's not my own. My inclination is determined partly by my own constitution and partly by the encounter with other beings, human and non-human, which affect one another. This is very important. Otherwise, falling inclination becomes basically equivalent with lifestyle, with the trend to grow individualization that in Western modernity has become more and more relevant. So I'm going to the conclusion. if this does make sense, what kind of a research program opens up? So can we just study or try to address forms of life in this sense, so ways of living that are adherent not to the thrust to make, become, do, and whatever, but just faithful to their forms. I suggest at least two possible directions. One is to address a very tricky idea of alternative science and technology practices. Also, Elizabeth talked earlier about alternatives. Well, what does it mean, alternative science and technology practices? Means different goals and different means. This is not, I mean, I believe at least, not just a stupid question, because the force of science and technology is its self-imposing evidence, in a sense. The idea that it works, it is able to produce results, to force nature, and so on and so forth. But the result is what we are witnessing with climate change and whatever. So there is some idea about what an alternative science can be. For example, the possibility of reconciling with nature in the sense of avoid identity thinking, drawing nature to us, but going towards nature, which basically means acknowledge that in any moment in which we address nature, we are not able to grasp it in full, even in a counterfactual way, so in a kind of postponed idea of grasping in full, and which means that we have to choose a modest technologies that are reversible, for example, that not pretend to set out just one possible use of a resource, but recognize that there could be many interactions, many possibilities that we have to respect and not destroy. So it's not a case, also Benjamin makes a similar case. It's not a case against science and against technology, but it's a case for rethinking. And of course, I have no time to elaborate on that, but there are around many experiences already of that are worth addressing by proper sociological research. And to my understanding, up to now, they are not. Likewise, we have what Laura Santemery calls alternative value practices. So a lot of experiences of everyday activism, somebody called this way, that is, of course, it encompasses a lot of things, for farmer markets to permaculture to zona défendre, and many other experiences, where the task of sociological research is to distinguish those experiences that have a potential for change from those that just are local responses to the inabilities of the capitalist system to deliver its promise of well-being for everyone. So what can be the distinguishing feature? The notion of formal life may help, because it's not a matter of what you do, but how you do it, the way you do it. And the exemplarity of some experiences it's very important. What is the purpose of people that every year, according to the Global Witness report, risk or lose life from nature, Amazon forest and river basins and whatever? So why are they doing that? Of course, this is a very big example, people that we can just admire. But for any of us, there is a possibility to take some decision, a turning point in life. Those decisions that make a difference for us and for a collective, they are worth elaborating. They are not yet elaborated either in theory, complete at least, or in practice. So in that sense, I think that the notion of formal life have a promise. It's in sociology, it has not been followed very much up to now, apart a little bit, but I believe that it's time to take it outside, let's say, the philosophical dimension, and translate it into proper research programs. The goal is to, of course, exit from the dominant problematization, which I repeat, is not exited either by getting back to old naturalism, the distinction between humanity and non-humans and nature, or just celebrating the blurring of everything, because this is just become an instrument of power of continuing and deepening the exploitation of nature and humans. And this is quite dangerous. I stop here. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Luigi, for this contribution. So with this speech, this finally plenary speaker, we will finish, and the ideas that the two speakers have shared to us are two complementary perspectives on focusing on different lenses on social practices and how the different narratives have changed over time and have ended up by blurring. And I think that they have been a very nice way to finish and to move to the closing session.
Bona tarda. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Institut d'Estudis Catalans, just a few words at the end of this 15th European Sociological Association Conference, a major event in the European sociology. Besides being the Catalan Academy or Catalan Language Academy, the Institut d'Estudis Catalans is the Catalan Academy of Sciences and Humanities, and sociology is one of its areas, included in Philosophy and Social Sciences section, one of Institute 5 sections. Salvador Giner, an internationally relevant sociologist, is a former president of Institut d'Estudis Catalans. The Institut d'Estudis Catalans also hosts the Associació Catalana de Sociologia, the Catalan Scientific Society devoted to sociology, and which up to August 2019 was chaired by Marta Soler, current ESA president, and nowadays is chaired by Paquita San Vicent Tourné. Because of the relationship with sociology, we are pleased to have supported the 15th ESA conference, for example, by being the venue of the opening and closing ceremonies in a hybrid format, face-to-face and online, or by being the reference site for development of streaming sessions. During the conference week, the Institut d'Estudis Catalans has hosted first 17 students from the ESA Summer School, and then 11 members of ESA Executive Board coming from all over Europe. At the same time, the dimensions of what was happening online were huge in number, as nearly 4,000 researchers attended, setting a new record, but also huge in contents in a qualitative way because of the scientific rigor of contributions. The conference theme, Sociological knowledges for alternative futures, fits very well in our context of pandemic coronavirus and of many other relevant challenges, such as climate change or strong conflicts, sometimes violent, sometimes not violent, but in both cases with relevant consequences for social development. The work done during the 2021 Barcelona ESA conference will contribute to a better understanding of society and to advance in the sociological scientific knowledge in a way that will help us to improve our societies. Enhorabona per l'èxit d'aquest congrés. Congratulations for this successful conference. I ara té la paraula la doctora Ligia Ferro, Chair of the Conference Committee. Dr. Ferro.
Thank you, Doctora Maria Corominas. Thank you also for inviting us to the Institute de Estudis Catalães and for supporting all the conference matters. I would like to say that some words on the conference. So the executive committee organized in different ESA committees, and the ESA office members collaborated very actively in diverse tasks for this conference organization. The work we developed was in line with what the association has done in past conferences. We followed the schedule and had to make, of course, some adaptations because this is the first ESA conference entirely online. Implying a huge organization, which might not be so visible as we are not dealing with a physical conference. A vast team of organizers overcame the obstacles imposed by the pandemic, so we made it. I would like to thank to the members of the executive committee for the hard work on the conference, and to the research network coordinators who have been selecting and organizing sessions, making comments, sharing suggestions. Them, along with chairs of the councils of national associations and research networks, were also involved in different tasks, and all of them developed an excellent work. In the last 2 years, numerous online meetings took place with the different groups and actors. We faced problems, looked and found good solutions together. I think that the final result is a proof of that. The ESA office has been doing a lot of work. My special thanks to the conference assistant, Elizabeth Torres. She has worked very much to make this conference come true, and always with a positive spirit, even on the busiest moments. Also, thank you very much to Esmera Yogun, the ESA's General Secretary, for all the support, and to all the conference volunteers. Without your work and commitment, this conference would not be possible. Thank you for contributing so vibrantly to the European sociology. The local organizing committee, chaired by Teresa Sorde, was also, of course, crucial since the first moment and until the end of this process. Barcelona is the place where all of us would like to be, and also the place where the local organizing committee would like to organize this conference. However, all the colleagues of the LOC were flexible to change our mindset and go for online conference. So I, on behalf of ESA, say my big thanks to the colleagues of the LOC, representing several institutions of Catalonia, and working together in different institutions, which is also a big challenge. Now we see that this conference was a big success, given the big participation online, both in the scientific and social activities. Despite the technical problems that we encountered sometimes, the conference platform worked really well, and we were able to assist you solving your problems within a reasonable time frame. ESA is reinventing itself and making history. It was possible to organize a meeting of around 4,000 participants and more than 900 sessions exclusively online and with success. So thank you all for participating and for accepting the challenge of this digital meeting in pandemic times. Thank you very much.
Moltes gràcies, doctora Ligia Ferro. Ara té la paraula la doctora Marta Soler, President of ESA.
Moltes gràcies. Thank you, Dr. Corominas. Well, dear fellows, we are coming to the end of this conference and this adventure. The afternoon of the 31st of August, we were just 4 days ago, we opened this 15th conference with the leading figure of Mariana Pineda. Mariana Pineda is a revolutionary woman, a feminist, that she was guided by strong democratic values and and she, why not saying so, also was very attractive. And she started and providing a meaning to this. Federico García Lorca, the Spanish revolutionary playwright, gave to us her words as a present forever. And after 100 years, almost 100 years later, he wrote these words. The meaning of these words are still prevailing, and they have a lot of sociological meaning. We should congratulate ourselves. And Luigi was saying so many things about this conference that we can congratulate ourselves about having achieved this. And we have to congratulate ourselves for creating spaces like this one, this virtual one, the previous one that we've had, spaces like this conference that allow us to reflect from sociology on issues like justice, democracy, freedom, sustainability, equality, and how to achieve this through actions we have impacts on the improvement on so many people's lives in Europe and across the world. Like the impact that the action of Mariana had on the future of many women and the future liberties. I want to thank, there have been so many thanks, so I want to add my thanks to the previous one done, to so many people who've been sending thank you emails to the office, saying thank you emails on the chats, on the many Zooms that have been, these 900 Zooms that have been happening throughout the conference. So my personally thank also, and thank you on behalf of ESA. Also, thank you very special to the Institute of Studis Catalans for hosting us, some of you of us, but also providing a lot of technological support that has been always there to make sure that the summer school was successful and that sessions like this one run successfully here through YouTube. So there has been a lot of technology, and we thank for that the Institute. And also we think that to be able to at least show the images through online of this beautiful building of the 17th century that we are so grateful to have here in Barcelona. This has been the first online conference, and it has been a challenge, but we were not stopped. Sociology did not stop with this challenge, we know that, and the ESA did not stop with these challenges, and we turned any difficulties into possibilities. So with this, we come to the end of this 15th European Sociological Conference, and I'm extremely pleased to have been able to contribute to ESA and to contribute to sociology. Thank you.
I finalment parlarà la doctora Teresa Sorder, Chair of the Local Organizing Committee.
Gràcies, doctora Corominas. Since Barcelona was announced as the venue for the ESA Conference 2021, we have imagined it hundreds of times. If we were in a big auditorium, I would ask for a big round and deserved applause for all our amazing team of more than 140 volunteers who have been shown great dedication and the faster ever seen problem-solving capacity. We also want to acknowledge all the congratulation messages we got from many chairs, presenters, delegates who appreciate all the effort we have done to effectively organize this conference. These recognition messages make it possible for other volunteers and scholars to step up and to be willing to work as intensively as we've done to effectively organize the future ESA conferences editions. During these 4 full days, European sociology has shown to be more alive and necessary than ever. As a grand finale, we have prepared a surprise for you that will close the ESA 2021. Thank you, and see you all to the next conference.
Actually, sociologists have played a key role in the elaboration of the criteria for evaluation in Horizon Europe. Mainly, they have introduced the requirement for all sciences to demonstrate their social impact, beyond a utilitarian reductionistic conception of impact. And also the requirement of co-creation in the research process. Sociology is needed by all sciences to meet both requirements.
The conviction that science and technology must be a tool to make lives better, safer, fairer, and more just.
Only the title, the solution. The solution is knowledge and democracy.
What right do the police have? In that flag of liberty, I embroidered the greatest love of my life. Am I to remain here imprisoned? Oh, to have clear crystal wings to fly in search of you.